On a quiet morning in 1997, two men in homemade armor walked into a Los Angeles bank. What followed became the craziest street battle in modern U.S. history. This is the story of the North Hollywood Shootout. On February 28, 1997, the San Fernando Valley stirred awake under a pale winter sky. The streets of North Hollywood carried the ordinary sounds of the city: cars idling at lights, a gardener's leaf blower, the hum of a bank branch unlocking its doors. At 9:16 a.m., that calm fractured. Two men stepped out of a white Chevrolet Celebrity in front of the Bank of America on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. Their faces were hidden behind ski masks. Their bodies were wrapped in black homemade armor, layered steel, and Kevlar stitched together like something from a battlefield. Each carried assault rifles modified for full automatic fire. Inside the bank, customers froze. One robber fired into the ceiling, the sound cracking through the marble lobby. The other dragged a man by the arm, shouting, "This is a hold-up!" The bank floor was filled with the smell of gunpowder, and there was a screech of terrified voices. Outside, the sound of those first shots carried farther than they realized. Patrol officers Loren Farrell and Martin Perello, just blocks away, heard the gunfire and saw the armed figures moving into the bank. Their radio crackled. 211 in progress with shots fired. What should have been a swift, calculated robbery over in 8 minutes was already unraveling. And, in the next 44 minutes, LA would no longer be a city at peace, but a battlefield. 44 minutes of automatic gunfire echoing across North Hollywood. 44 minutes that would change how every police officer in America went to work. And it all began here, on a quiet Friday morning that turned into one of the most violent urban battles in American history. To understand that morning, you have to know the men who walked into the bank. Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Motosirianu were not typical robbers. They were something darker, forged by trauma, obsession, and a craving for power. Larry, the ringleader, had been shaped by crime from birth. Both his father and grandfather were robbers. His family described him as controlling, even cruel, a man who broke others down to bend them into his crew. His hatred of the police had roots in childhood. On his 6th birthday, the FBI stormed his home to arrest his father, a fugitive. Guns drawn, agents dragged his father away as Larry watched. That moment seared him. From then on, the law was the enemy. Emil was different. Born in Romania, he struggled with a heart condition. In high school, he weighed 350 pounds and endured relentless bullying. By adulthood, he was a trained engineer, but was stuck running a failing computer repair shop. A brain surgery in 1996 also left him epileptic and unsteady, while still caring for his disabled wife and mother. In 1989, the two met at Gold's Gym in Venice. They realized they both had similar interests and quickly bonded over weights and firearms. But their friendship was less equal than it appeared. Larry led, thanks to his experience, and Emil obeyed. Together, they dreamed of something larger that would get them respected. Hollywood fed their imaginations. Films like Heat and Scarface became blueprints, pushing them to see themselves not as thieves, but as cinematic anti-heroes. By 1997, they were deep in preparation. They had practiced at shooting ranges, scouted banks, timed police responses with scanners, sewn watches into their gloves, built their own body armor, and carried more than 3,300 rounds of ammunition. It was a soldier's kit for a war they believed they could win. And on that February morning, they marched straight into it. They did not improvise. The heist was a blueprint, drawn, tested, and carefully timed. For months, Larry and Emil drove past the Bank of America on Laurel Canyon. They watched delivery trucks, they noted shift changes, they sat in parked cars and listened to police radio traffic, learning the rhythm of patrol beats and the 8-minute window they believed would give them freedom. It was all practice. Maps, stopwatches, and a police scanner tuned to LAPD channels. Their gear read like a small armory. Investigators later cataloged 5 illegally modified rifles, like a Norinco Type 56, an HK-91 pattern rifle, and AR-style platforms, plus a Beretta 92 FS pistol. They carried more than 3,300 rounds, many of them armor-piercing. Their homemade armor combined a Type 2A vest with added steel plates over thighs, shins, and groin. Plates were riveted, straps brazed, and seams sealed as if stitching a suit for battle. One officer later called the suits walking tanks. It was accurate. Small, human measures threaded through the technical. They sewed watches into the backs of gloves so no wrist would be exposed when lying down to fire. They practiced loading 75-round drums. Larry kept a notebook with rental receipts, taped maps, and small notes that made planning feel like hobby work. Emil, who hated confrontation, practiced steadying his breath at a local range, whispering to himself until the recoil no longer felt like betrayal. On the morning of February 28th, they swallowed phenobarbital, a bitter sedative, to deaden jitters. It's unclear how much the sedative dulled them, as the eyewitnesses later described both men as unnervingly calm, and then, at times, suddenly frenzied. They rehearsed escape routes and calculated an 8-minute police window, a cold arithmetic that set their timetable. The goal was simple and precise: get in, open the vault, grab the cash, and get out before the city could react. Movies like Heat and Scarface shaped how they saw themselves. To them, these weren't just films, they were blueprints. But behind that cinematic gloss lay a series of fragile choices: an unexpected patrol, a delayed armored car, a jammed rifle. These variables would later come to matter. They always do. At 9:16 a.m., the plan moved from paper to execution. They stepped from a white 1987 Chevrolet Celebrity, masks on, rifles low. As they moved toward the bank's glass doors, Larry saw a patrol car driving down Laurel Canyon. For a moment, he wasn't sure if the officers had noticed them, but this didn't stop them. Upon entry, they forced a customer inside, slammed the door, and one fired a burst into the ceiling to announce the robbery. Emil pushed toward the teller area, and then the vault door. Inside, he found less cash than expected. What he saw was not a single pile of loose bills ready to be scooped up. It was a maze of locked compartments and teller safes, small cages, and time-locked drawers that needed keys, combinations, or staff to open. Earlier that week, the bank had changed its cash routine. Armored car runs and morning replenishments were shifted across branches as a security measure. The result was a vault with far less money than the robbers expected, and a setup that made fast grabbing impossible. Frustration crushed their planning. Emil's anger at the shortfall turned violent. He fired bursts into a safe that could not be emptied any quicker, shredding bills and killing the chance of a clean 8-minute exit. They had counted on about $750,000 in that vault. Instead, they found only $303,305. Outside, chance intervened. Officers Loren Farrell and Martin Perello, who were on patrol, had seen armed figures entering, and that's when they called it in.
L40, be advised, I got 2 witnesses over here say there's possibly 2 or 3 suspects inside, possible AK-47s are wearing ski masks and dark clothing.
The 8-minute window that Larry had trusted evaporated in seconds. Patrol cars converged. What should have been a quick in and out became a scene surrounded by blue lights. 3 minutes into the robbery, Larry left Emil tearing at the vault and walked back into the morning light. Outside, the scene had already transformed. More than 20 LAPD officers had surrounded the building, taking cover behind patrol cars, brick walls, and even palm trees. Their weapons, mostly 9mm pistols and .38 revolvers, looked like toys compared to the black rifle in Larry's hands. At 9:24 a.m., Larry raised his modified Norinco AK-47 and opened fire. The sound was deafening, bursts of 7.62 by 39mm rounds cracking down Laurel Canyon Boulevard. Bullets chewed into squad cars, shattered windshields, and ricocheted off pavement. Officers scrambled, many diving flat onto the asphalt. Civilians screamed and ran for cover, some ducking behind hedges, others frozen in place. For 4 straight minutes, Larry stood in the open, calmly sweeping his rifle across the street, walking fire from one end to the other. Every step measured, every burst deliberate. When Emil joined him, the fight became a storm. Together they loosed hundreds of rounds, wounding officers James Ziborovan and Martin Whitfield, both pinned under fire. Zaboravan, a rookie just months on the job, managed to hit Larry, but in return was shot twice himself. Still, he dragged others to safety, using his own vest as a shield. The LAPD was outgunned. Handguns bounced harmlessly off the robber's armor. Shotgun pellets scattered without effect. Desperation took over. A group of officers sprinted into B&B Sales, a nearby gun shop, begging for rifles. The store owner handed over AR-15s and boxes of ammunition. Others improvised with what they had, commandeering an armored bank truck, driving it straight into the firefight to rescue the wounded. Above, news helicopters circled. Cameras captured the moving battle in real time. A bank parking lot turned into an urban war zone, and the images were broadcast live to millions. SWAT, still in training gear from the academy gym, arrived in bulletproof vests and shorts. They joined the fight without hesitation, dragging injured civilians to cover. Every block became contested ground. The robbers fired and advanced, leaving behind cars riddled with holes and officers bleeding into the street. By the time they broke from the parking lot and into residential neighborhoods, over 1,100 rounds had been fired by the robbers alone. The police, outmatched but unyielding, returned with more than 650 of their own. The city was under siege, and it wasn't over yet. The fight shifted again when Larry stepped out toward the north parking lot, using Emil's fire from inside as cover. They moved like soldiers trading positions, one firing, the other advancing, but fate intervened in ways their meticulous planning had never accounted for. As Emil pushed through the doors with his duffel, the hidden dye packs planted by the bank exploded. Red smoke and chemical mist poured out, staining bills and filling the air. Emil staggered, eyes stinging. A moment later, a police round grazed his forehead, leaving a bloody streak across the hood of a car he used for cover. From above, one of 6 circling helicopters captured him, touching the wound, leaving a crimson handprint on metal, a mark as vivid as any battlefield flag. When Emil relayed what happened, Larry made a snap decision. Believing the cash was ruined, he abandoned the bag entirely. In reality, much of the money was still usable, sealed in plastic wrap. But the robbery was no longer about profit. It had become survival. For the next 20 minutes, Larry fought almost alone, trading fire with dozens of officers encircling the lot. Bullets tore through his body armor, slipping through seams at his side, gouging his torso. Still, he pressed on, adrenaline and barbiturates dulling the pain. When his AK finally ran dry, he sprinted back to their car and pulled out an HK-91 rifle, resuming fire. A bullet smashed into his arm, leaving it nearly useless. To compensate, he rested the rifle on his injured forearm, firing at a news helicopter until his rounds went wild. Meanwhile, Emil limped into the Chevrolet, its tires shredded, its gas tank leaking. He crept forward in the street, firing bursts from the window while Larry ran alongside, using the vehicle as cover. Officers closed in. More rounds struck Larry's armor. One hit his magazine well, jamming the HK permanently. He switched to another AK, but the modifications made it unreliable, jamming after every few shots. Each malfunction was another second lost, another chance for officers to close the distance. Emil begged him to get inside. He flung the passenger door open, ready to flee. Larry refused. He slammed the door shut, choosing instead to stand his ground. Together, they reached the edge of the residential blocks east of the bank. Emil kept the car crawling forward, expecting Larry to follow. But by the time Emil reached the front of a semi-truck, Larry had doubled back. They lost sight of each other. From then on, the two men who had prepared for everything were fighting alone. Larry's final stand came in a choke point between a fence, a semi-truck, and advancing officers. He was still armed, a failing AK and a Beretta strapped to his shoulder, but bleeding heavily, hit twice in the back. One round tore through his armor gap and clipped an artery. Panic set in. When the rifle jammed again, he tugged the charging handle over and over until the chamber locked tight, the weapon useless. Cornered, Larry crawled under the semi. Officers pressed him with more fire, forcing him out into the open. Desperate, he drew the Beretta, firing one-handed. Another bullet tore through his hand, sending the pistol clattering away. Surrounded, bleeding, and out of weapons, the fight was over. At 9:56 a.m., Larry Jr. lay dead. Emil pressed on alone. The Chevrolet limped deeper into the neighborhood, tires shredded, every turn leaving a smear of leaking fuel. He needed a new vehicle. The first motorist he confronted reversed frantically, refusing to yield. Emil raised his rifle, but the driver sped away. Moments later, he spotted a pickup and opened fire through its windshield. Shards of glass sprayed the driver's face, and one round grazed his head. The man abandoned the truck, door wide open, but left with the keys. Emil dragged his gear across, tried hot wiring it, and failed. By then, SWAT had entered the neighborhood. A team pulled up beside him, opening fire. Emil dived from the truck just before bullets shredded the driver's seat. He crouched behind the battered Chevrolet, returning fire in bursts. Again, his armor held, plates sparking under rifle fire. But the officers adapted. One lay flat, aiming low through the gap beneath the cars. A shot tore into Emil's calf. Another smashed his shin. One officer noticed that his legs were exposed, and again he targeted his legs. Emil dropped to the ground, still firing from his back. His weapon fell from his grip after another bullet hit his arm. He raised his hands. But the fight had stretched the nerves of every man on the scene. For seconds, maybe longer, the SWAT officers didn't see the surrender and kept firing. His legs took more rounds. When it ended, Emil was face down, disarmed and shackled. One officer pressed a hot rifle barrel against the back of his head to prevent movement. It burned his skin. Medics tried to approach, but police, fearing a third gunman or hidden explosives, turned them away. Emil lay bleeding, his barbiturate-thinned blood pooling beneath him. For 56 minutes, he remained untreated. By the time paramedics reached him, he was gone. The Battle of North Hollywood had ended with the 2 robbers dead. 12 officers and 8 civilians were wounded. Over 2,000 rounds exchanged. Helicopter footage replayed endlessly on national TV. Cars shredded by bullets, blood on sidewalks, and a city asking how its police could be so outmatched on its own streets. The consequences rippled outward. The LAPD and departments nationwide began issuing patrol rifles, AR-15 rifles mounted in cruisers, and training for active shooter tactics. Congress passed provisions allowing surplus military gear to flow to local police, a decision that still divides opinion today. Some call it necessary. Others say it began the militarization of law enforcement. But beneath the policy shifts was the human toll. Officers who survived carried trauma for years.
A single fully automatic AK-47 makes a whole lot of noise, but when Matasariano joined his cohort in the lobby, the sound of two became the stuff of nightmares. It was the Devil's Symphony, and something that stayed with me even to this day.
Dispatchers underground, hearing chaos over the air, spoke later of panic and helplessness. Some officers from that day later took their own lives. The wait of 44 minutes stretched decades. In the end, Larry and Emil's heist yielded nothing but destruction. What they sought in money or glory was erased in smoke and gunfire, but the mark they left on American policing remains. A morning that began with routine traffic and humming leaf blowers ended with one of the most infamous firefights in U.S. history. A battle that still haunts Los Angeles. If you'd like to see more in-depth documentaries like this one, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. It helps us bring more history to light.